Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Nice to see some new faces in the crowd. Tonight is February 21st, 2023. There's a meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. And I'll just note that Councilmember Posada is at a conference and won't be joining us tonight all the way over in California. So I hope he's having fun. We're going to start tonight, as we usually do, with a poetry reading. I'll ask our poet laureate, Liza Francis Wolf, to join us at the podium. And special guests.
Special guests. Good evening. In continued honor of Black History Month, we have a couple of poets for you tonight. We will begin with Gina Alicante Stisi, and then followed by her brother, Sanze Alicante Stisi. So thank you. I will step aside.
Thank you, Liza. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you guys for having us. Today I'd like to read you guys a poem from Lucille Clifton. She was born in 1936, and she's widely known for her poetry and her writing in children's books. She was actually discovered by Langston Hughes, and she was the first person to have 2 books picked for finalists for the Pulitzer Prize. She writes a lot about diversity and change. The poem's called Won't You Celebrate With Me by Lucille Clifton. Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model. Born in Babylon, both non-white and woman, what did I see to be except myself? I made it up, here, on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight, my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Sanze, and I am in 6th grade at Carolina Friends School. I will be reading a self-written poem that is called What Does It Mean to Be Great? What does it mean to be great? To be great is a massive burden to bear. Greatness spawns love cells to fight the virus of hate. Greatness empowers the uneducated to expand their vision. Greatness moves mountains. Greatness changes minds. But to be great, everybody needs to choose great. Greatness is an option rather than a necessity. To be great is when you wander onto the path nobody has ever explored. To be great is when Martin Luther King Jr. spoke the words, "I have a dream." Greatness is when you admit to the truth you have been denying. To be great is a massive burden to bear, but we should all try.
Thank you both very much for coming out this evening. I think we start off our meetings in the best way any council in the state does, by doing this kind of thing. So thank you for being here. And Liza, thank you for bringing our special guests.
Fantastic.
You're welcome to sit through the audit presentation.
Thank you.
No thanks. Thanks, but no thanks.
Okay. We have one resolution on the agenda tonight. It's listed incorrectly as a proclamation. It's actually a resolution. This is one that we did last year as well for National Invasive Species Awareness Week, which was recommended to us by Terry Buckner. I believe last year Susan introduced the resolution, so I've asked her if she would do that again this evening. I don't believe we have a staff person here to kind of receive this, so we may just, Susan, if you would just maybe summarize the resolution and move it forward if you like.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Terry Buckner, for once again submitting this resolution for us. The resolution designates February 20th through 26th as National Invasive Species Awareness Week, and among other things, It recognizes native plant species for the important role they play in preserving our ecosystem, flood mitigation, increasing biodiversity, decreasing threat of wildfires, and preserving the region's natural and cultural heritage. The resolution goes on to recognize community volunteers who play a really important role in removing invasive species, in protecting our native plants. And also, the resolution goes on to recognize our Community Climate Action Plan for its important role in terms of preserving native plants. And it also recognizes the really important role that the town plays in preserving our native plants. So this goes on to resolve that Town Council recognizes February 20th through 26th as Invasive Species Awareness Week, encourages residents to join in. Lots of activities will be going on around supporting native species and removing the invasive species. And those will be held at Anderson Community Park, Saturday, February 25th. So come on out, join us.
Thank you, Susan.
Yes, Randy.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
My comment is I want to thank you, Susan, for bringing this forth again. Thank you, Terry, for initiating it. I want to thank Barbara Stenross and a shout out to Steve Feuerstein and all of his volunteers and the Climate Action team who have consistently worked to eradicate invasives and help promote invasive planting education so that folks in our community know which plants contribute to the expansion of invasives. So thank you.
Thanks, Randy. So I have a motion by Susan, a second by Randy to adopt the resolution. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Matter passes unanimously. I see we do have Laura Janway in the audience from our planning department. She's the town's environmental planner or coordinator. I'm not remembering quite which it is. But I believe we'll be helping to lead the activity this Saturday from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock at Anderson Community Park, which is basically a volunteer effort to remove invasive species from parkland. So appreciate you and your team for helping to coordinate that, Laura. All right. Announcement of upcoming meetings, Mr. Clerk.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Just have a couple announcements. First, we have the Racial Equity Commission meeting on February 22nd. That's tomorrow at 6 p.m. and is at the Bim Street facility at 108 Bim Street. Next, we have the Human Services Advisory Commission, and that's on February 27th, beginning at 6:15, and that is virtual. And so the details are online under that listing for how to sign up to get the link. And then, of course, our next town council meeting will be next Tuesday, February 28th at 7 o'clock.
Thank you, Wesley. There is also a meeting of the Chapel Hill Transit Partners Committee this Thursday morning. Mr. Manager, neither Randy nor I will be able to attend that meeting, so hopefully Anne Marie will be able to attend for the town. Okay, I see a nodding head, so thank you very much. Randy?
Yeah, I was just going to say that we will be engaged in a long program through the UNC School of Government on effective evaluation for manager and councils.
Any other upcoming meetings to announce? Not seeing any. I don't believe, Mr. Clerk, we had anyone signed up to speak this evening. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item is the approval of the May 24th, 2022 minutes with changes by Councilmember Romaine. The next item is request to amend the 2022-2023 Home Investment Partnership Program Annual Plan. The purpose of this item is to request that the Town Council consider approving a proposed amendment to the 2022-2023 Home Investment Partnership Program Annual Plan that was approved by the Town Council on June 14, 2022. The plan amendment would reallocate $105,000 originally allocated to Empowerment Incorporated to acquire a rental unit in Carrboro to instead acquire an affordable rental property in Chapel Hill.
Can you talk louder?
Yes, get a little close to the mic. The next item is a request to approve amending the 2021-2022 Home Investment Partnership Program Annual Plan to add the Home ARP Allocation Plan. The purpose of this item is to request that the Town Council consider amending the 2021-2022 Home Investment Partnership Program Annual Plan approved by the Town Council on May 4th, 2021. The plan amendment would add the allocation plan for $1,371,401 in Home Investment Partnerships American Rescue Plan Program Home ARP funding. The next item is consideration of a minor modification request to the Special Use Permit A project at 502-A North Greensboro Street. The purpose of this agenda item is to request that the Town Council consider approving a minor modification request for the Special Use Permit A for 502 North Greensboro Street. If approved, the modification would allow Hope Renovations to place a shipping container on the site for use as an office space. The next item is consideration of a minor modification request to the Special Use Permit A project for Estes Park Apartments at 306 Estes Drive. The purpose of the agenda item is to request that the Town Council consider approving a minor modification request for the Special Use Permit A for Estes Park Apartments at 306 Estes Drive. The modification would allow the property owner to construct a new maintenance building, replace the existing dumpster enclosure area, and remove 18 parking spaces from the site. And the last item is a request to approve a town code amendment to prohibit parking on East Winmore Avenue, east of Jewel Drive. The purpose of this item is to request that the Town Council consider approving an ordinance amendment to the Carrboro Town Code to prohibit parking on East Winmore Avenue from Jewel Drive East to Homestead Road.
All right, council members, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yes.
I'm seeing Sammy for number 5, Randy number 1.
Nope, no, 2 and 6.
One, three, four.
All right, so I am going to take this moment, y'all, to remind you to please, in the future, with items on the consent agenda, to email staff ahead of time if you have questions about them so that they can be answered by staff so that we can adopt the consent agenda.
Yeah, mine's not answerable by staff, so.
Okay. It's been a motion by Barbara to approve items 1, 3, and 4 on the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
By Susan. Any further? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? So items 1, 3, and 4 are approved unanimously. Item number 2. Is that you, Randy?
Yes, just a quick question. Trish, you might be able to answer this. For the Home Investment Partnership Program, the amendment, I just wanted to know specifically what were the components of the environmental review that were problematic? What does that include, and why was it problematic? Emery, fine.
Yes.
Awesome.
The issue with the environmental review was that it wasn't done in time.
What does that include?
I do not know the details of that, but I'm happy to find that out. I'm not sure what requirements, if there were anything that was different for the home program or not, but I can certainly find that out for you.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Move the item, please, Randy.
I'll move item number 2, request to amend the 2022-2023 Home Investment Partnership Program and Annual Plan.
Or a second? By Danny, moved by Randy, seconded by Danny to approve item number 2. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Next is item number 5. Was that
Yes,
Sam?
that's me. I understand the representative to Estes is here. Hey, how are you doing? Just had a quick question. Do you mind coming up thank you so much for being here. And yeah, everything on the plan looks great. I just, the town has had an interest in connectivity, and specifically our bike to school route plan identifies that connection between Pleasant Street and Estes Apartments, which is very close to where that building is going to be constructed on the plans. I don't know if there's an image of it.
Do we have a, is it possible to pull that up?
Anyways, my interest is in having that conversation with you or whoever is appropriate with Estes Apartments to make that connection happen however we can. And so I was wondering what you might recommend for doing that.
Sorry,
Would you
let
mind
me
introducing
just get
yourself
oriented.
before we go further? Would you
Oh,
mind
my name
introducing
is James Czar.
Mr. Czar, if you don't feel like you're prepared to answer that question tonight, that's perfectly understandable, because it's not part of the agenda item.
Talk loud into the microphone. I'm sorry, Mayor. I was talking because I can't hear with this over here.
Could you direct me to where the? Sure, thank you.
Yeah, right there. There's a stub out there.
Where the arrow
I,
is?
no, I see. I'm not prepared to
Yeah.
Okay.
discuss.
Okay. Would you be able to be in contact with our town staff to do that
Absolutely.
conversation?
Yep. And I'm actually meeting with the vice president of the company that actually owns Estes Park tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock in Virginia. So if I'd be happy to.
Yeah,
It's a connection between. Let me actually.
It's already an informal path there, and it'll just be a matter of us extending, and I don't know what kind of collaboration we could have in.
Are you looking for something like just a paved sidewalk? Or?
Paved, yeah, for biking and walking.
And is the grade basically, well, if it's an informal path, then would it just be a matter of getting a hard surface down?
Yeah, currently it's an informal path, and it's just a hard surface that would connect to you're extending your sidewalk in front of that structure, and perhaps extending that sidewalk so it connects to this road, which is currently used by everyone who lives there.
Okay, I can't speak for the owner because I'm not aware, but I don't think they would be unamenable to that. They're actually looking to improve Estes Park Apartments right now. So they actually do have sort of a vision to improve the amenities.
Isn't this like perfect timing for the improvement?
It obviously, well, actually, it kind of is if we're right in the vicinity. So I'd be happy to talk to them. If it's just a matter of putting down.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you are the appropriate person. The point is for you to
I can
connect
definitely
this, because apparently
coordinate
you are connected. We've been trying to do this for years, and that would be really
Oh.
helpful.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Thank you so much. Sorry to put
Absolutely.
you on the spot. How you're feeling.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Appreciate it, yeah, the help and the communication. And Mr. Manager, if we could maybe connect and follow up to get that along as part of our bike plan, is this connection. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. With that, I'll move the item.
I have one question.
Will you second it first?
Yes, I second.
Okay, what's your question?
And I'm sorry, is it Mr. Carr or Mr. Czar? I'm Czar with a Z. See, do you mind coming up for one more question? It's to follow up on a note that I received earlier today. So it sounds like a new trash compactor will be put into the.
Yes, if you've viewed the site, you're probably aware that the solid waste collection is a little bit less than ideal.
Right.
The owner actually has a civil engineer in Virginia that mostly what he does for them is figures out solid waste. So sometime in the near future, and you have to understand they own properties all up and down the East Coast and in Arizona, but they will be coming before you and asking to probably put in at least one trash compactor, and then just redoing their recycling and the rest of the solid waste, because as it is right now, it's not ideal. So they're well aware that the trash and recycling has to be improved, but and it is in the discussion phase, but I would love to say that we could swap out a compactor for the dumpsters that we're moving, but I'm not the one that would make that decision. That's really their civil engineer that would address that. But it is in the works, and within the next year or so, you will be seeing something, probably another minor modification to just get the solid waste and the recycling in a more aesthetic, more workable configuration.
Thank you for that. And just one more question. So the compactor will be added. That will free up more space for the recycling. And right now, I don't see any recycling for glass or paper or plastics, or those will be added in for the recycling.
So when the compactor goes in, as I understand it, and I'm a structural engineer, so my understanding is shallow, not very deep. When you put in the compactor, you pick up a lot of the dumpsters that are there, which will free up space. There's some consideration of where you put the compactor. You may need more than one compactor depending on like the linearity. I beg your pardon. The linearity of the site. You don't want people walking too far, so. A compactor will go in, they'll pick up some of the dumpsters, and we'll have an opportunity to, figure out the recycling. But that's really something more for the civil that works on that particular aspect, and that's in concert with, I guess, Orange County Recycling, if they're actually the ones that. I'm not sure how Carrboro works in its municipality, if the recycling is by the municipality, if it's a private haul, but it will be coordinated. So it's
in the works.
It's a recognized problem. Right now, the dumpsters, I think, are mostly sitting on pavement, and it's not optimal. So they recognize it, and they are interested in increasing the amenities, which is part of what this little project is. We're moving the maintenance and storage from right outside the pool to someplace a little bit less conspicuous, so that they can recapture the area around the pool to have some other amenity, whether it's a gym or community house. And so within the next couple of years, you'll be seeing something will come before you if it can't be done with a staff modification.
Great, thank you. And final comment, I really appreciate this information. When I visited yesterday, the containers for the cardboard recycling, they're just filled to the brim.
Yes.
So anybody who wants to recycle cardboard, there's no opportunity to do so. I imagine it ends up in the trash. So that may be something that can be done sooner rather than later, is just to be able to empty those more regularly. So when you meet tomorrow, if you could pass along that information, it would be appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saar. All right. It's been moved by Sammy and seconded by Susan to approve item number 5. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Matter passes unanimously. And finally is item number 6. I think that's back to Randy.
It is. Thank you, Damon. Okay, I have two, they're not really questions, they're really, because I'm comfortable with the recommendations of staff on approving the town code amendment. But one of my questions is whether or not this is a good opportunity to call upon our community engagement program to see what the needs of the folks are who are parking along Winmore, and to find out, well, if parking becomes prohibited and there's monitoring attached to that in some shape or form, where are folks going to go next? Are they going to go to Camden? Are they going to go to Highlands? In other words, the problem is just going to move. It'll be like whack-a-mole. So I would love to see our communications plan enacted here to kind of engage with people and find out, okay, you want to do this pickup. This is problematic for this neighborhood. How can we resolve this problem? That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is we have a youth advisory board, and I'm not understanding why we don't, engage our own youth advisory board to say, this is your high school. How do you perceive this, and how would you go about helping to resolve this issue? I think it would be a really good object lesson for our youth advisory board to be engaged in something that involves their own school. So with that, I'll move the item and ask that those recommendations be followed up.
Is there a second?
I'll second, and also I have a comment for Mr. Manager White. Manager White, I wanted to just double check on a couple things. It sounded like Chief ATAC has agreed to a 6th no parking sign that would be up at the intersection of Homestead and East Winmore Avenue. So there would end up being 3 no parking signs on one side of East Winmore and then 3 on the other side. And I didn't know if any change needed to be made on that. But the other item was I think years ago, the developer accidentally painted over the markings in the street that are indicating where there are illegal parking spaces. And so cars keep parking there. And so some of the residents were hoping, as long as we're putting these no parking signs on East Winmore, we could add a 7th no parking sign that would be at the intersection of East Winmore and Atterbury. And so I don't know if that needs to be added to the town code amendment in order to do that.
Just for a recall, there would be 7 signs total, and that last one would need to be added to the amendment tonight.
Right.
Another question.
Amy?
Yeah, and looking at the map, I noticed that Legacy Academy is really right there, and I was wondering if it is the parking for Chapel Hill High or Legacy Academy. Kind of gets to Randy's point of communicating with the people who are making use of the road there, and kind of understanding what the need is. That's just a question I have. So I'm supportive of Randy, what you were raising there. And I do think it would be great for the Youth Advisory Board, easy win and something that needs to be worked on. So to whatever degree they can be engaged to think this through, I think that is a good exercise in civic engagement. Thanks. With that, I'll second the move.
Okay, so I think it was moved by Randy and seconded by
Okay.
Susan, I think. Is that right? All in favor of, do we need to make an amendment to the
Yes,
resolution?
if you
Mr.
want to add the
Manager?
7th
What is the
sign to
amendment?
make that amendment.
To add the 7th sign
7th
described
sign.
by Chief ATAC.
Good question.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I apologize. So, I'm not for or against, right? So you got 7 signs that we want here. But I guess my question is, what Councilmember Haven O'Donnell was talking about as far as getting more information, what Councilmember Slade agreed, is that information, do we need to get that before we get the sign? Or do you think that that's not what you meant? I guess I was just trying to figure that out. Either. Okay, Randy.
Yeah, I
you.
think that it'd be great to get that information before, but I think in the
Either way.
short run, I think we might as well put the signs out there and see. I mean, maybe in between now and getting the signs out there, which takes a little bit, there could be some straw poll of folks who are out there and just find out, what it is, where do they think they go? Because they will go someplace else. And the question is, will that just be another one of the contiguous neighborhoods? And so I think that we really, rather than having Camden or Highlands come before us and make the same request, we need to start to look deeper at resolving the larger problem.
And then at Legacy Academy, or do they not have adequate parking? Is there ever overflow parking there or not? That's my last question. Thanks.
I'll just speak.
I'd like to ask Mr. Manager to weigh in here,
Yes.
because I think we're doing a lot of suppositions up here without asking staff for the information that's behind the agenda item. Can you help us, give us any insight here, Mr. Manager?
So no, we just got the request that the traffic was backing up because of the parents picking up students at the high school. And so that's the reason that we moved forward to put the signs up, to try to avoid the parking along this particular section on East Winmore.
Right, so the information staff has is that parents are parking there because they're dropping their kids off at the high school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, picking up.
There more? Can you add?
Trish McGuire, Planning, Zoning. The information we have is that parents were there to pick up, not drop off. So they were waiting in the afternoon, and that it's gotten better since the school year has progressed. And so, there are new patterns, new parents at the beginning of the school year at Chapel Hill High may have caused them to look for places. So I think a follow-up is still what we want to do, though.
Okay.
And for the specificity, I think we'll just need to specifically describe that location back from the intersection. So if that's what you're conveying as an amendment to the town code, it's not really about the number of signs per se, but just to say that first space, which was, you guys might remember, was an action that was taken last year when you did the modification from the permit side, when you did a modification at Winmore with the residential units there at the corner of East Winmore Avenue and Atterbury. That the resolution you adopted did remove that parking space from the site plan for the project, for the neighborhood.
So the amendment that we would consider to the action tonight is to add a no parking sign at the top of the hill, in addition to the other 6 that are described in the resolution. Is that correct?
There are 5. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the resolution
6.
just speaks about the location, not really the number of signs. So what you would just add is a provision that says also there's no parking. So the town code specifically prohibits the parking at within 15 feet of a intersection, but that space is a little bit further back from 15 feet from the intersection. So you would be specifying that there is not a parking space allowed on the, I guess it's really the north side of East Winmore Avenue, just past the Atterbury intersection. I think that's correct from a locational perspective. To the east of the intersection, yeah, sorry, but on the north side, right? Does that make sense?
I just want to be clear about what language we're using in the ordinance amendment tonight. What
Okay.
it currently says is both sides of East Winmore Avenue from the intersection of Homestead to the intersection of Jewel Drive.
Right. So we don't say the number of signs. We can put as many signs there, no problem there. That's sort of a different part of it. I'm just saying the piece you would add is a statement which is not in there presently that says that no parking is also prohibited on the north side of East Winmore Avenue, east of the intersection with Atterbury.
Say that last part again, the location. Say that again.
I would say it's on the north side of East Winmore Avenue, basically one parking space, and we'll put the dimension in there from, on the east of the Atterbury intersection.
Okay, so in addition to the location indicated in the
Yes.
resolution or in the draft ordinance, we have the north side of East Winmore Avenue, east of Atterbury Avenue.
Yes, east of the intersection with Atterbury.
Everybody understand the amendment? Is that amendment acceptable to you, Randy?
Absolutely.
To you, Susan?
Yes, it is.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, matter passes unanimously.
A quick question. It was mentioned there were lines that had been painted there on the road previously, and so I'm wondering, is that something that's in the code, or why are there no lines there now? Do you know, Trish?
I'd like to look with Marty at the site plan and at that particular point. I mean, Winmore is a different situation from most neighborhoods in town, in that parking is allowed on the town streets. It was part of the village mixed-use development. So are you familiar with the question, Marty? Because if you can answer it, I'm happy to come on up.
Sure. The village mixed use allows for street design according to NCDOT traditional neighborhood design standards. So the street specifications and design in general is a little different than streets elsewhere in town, and It did allow for on-street parking, but through real-world observation, this particular spot was known to be problematic. So that's why it was made a part of the item in April 2022. That was to say that it would be this particular spot that had been known to be problematic would be made to be more consistent with other streets in town. Does that make sense? In accordance with what
Yeah,
Tricia
but in
says.
regard to the lines, were they there before? Or
They were. They have been painted over, Susan. If you don't correct me here, they have been painted over. Just this one space, not all the spaces along that street.
Okay.
But there's no parking sign yet.
And the experience is because the design doesn't really accommodate parking there.
Yeah, there are conflicts between a parked car and cars trying to navigate around it.
It's close to the intersection. Yeah.
Thank you both very much. Appreciate it. Okay, that gets us through the consent agenda. Before we move on, I just want to note that we are joined tonight by Nora Spencer, who is a little bit of a hometown hero at the moment. I want to congratulate Nora on her being a recent recipient of the National Association of Home Builders Woman of the Year Award. So congratulations on that, Nora. And looking forward to seeing what more you're planning with the new structure on Greensboro Street. All right, Mr. Manager, on to other matters, please.
The first item of the other matters is the annual comprehensive financial report and the independent audit for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022. The purpose of the agenda item is for the town's independent auditor, Forvis, previously Dixon Hughes Goodman, to present to the town council the annual comprehensive financial report and audit for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022. And there's a resolution, and John Frank and Chad Cook are coming forward to present the audit.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manager, and we wanted to thank, before we get started, wanted to thank Arch and Donald and all the town's finance staff. We know that the audit process each year it's lengthy. It's a long request list, and it's a lot that we go through, and we know they put in a lot of time and hard work getting ready for that and getting through this process with us. So we just want to say thank you for that. And then also to the town council for being willing to work with us again for the fiscal 2022 audit. The complete annual comprehensive financial report has been reviewed with management, and it's going to be ready for posting tomorrow morning following the conclusion of this presentation. Last year's report once again received the certificate for achievement for excellence in financial reporting. So several years running now, the town has received that award. It did come in for fiscal 22. I think they were a little behind on their reviews, but just came in January. So that has been received. As it relates to the audit, first things first, we want to mention that we issued another unmodified or clean audit opinion for the fiscal 2022 statements. This year, we were again required to also complete a compliance audit. So when the town has more than $750,000 in federal award expenditures and or more than $500,000 in state award expenditures, we also have to do some compliance auditing. So we're looking at grant compliance in accordance with grant agreements and the regulations that are set by those granting agencies. This year, our major federal program was the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, a HUD program, as well as for the major state program, it was the Powell bill. So we had to look at two programs, one federal, one state. As a result of those audits, we're happy to report that we had no findings of noncompliance, and we did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in the internal controls surrounding compliance. So we are required to look at both of those things, and again, happy to report no findings related to those. Our presentation tonight is going to focus mostly on two documents. So you should have received earlier, there's a red bound copy of our report to the town council. And then we also have a one-page financial summary. So it's just financial highlights that compare fiscal 2021 numbers to fiscal 2022. And we've got some comments prepared for just some of the changes that you'll see kind of year to year with a focus on the general fund. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll look at that report to the town council. So again, that bound document that was passed out. I believe there was also a final draft stamped version in the agenda for tonight. There were no changes from that draft version, so this final version should align exactly with that. At the beginning, you'll see there's some contact information for John Frank, who's audit partner on the engagement, as well as myself. Should there be any questions, about the annual comprehensive financial report, once you all have a chance to review that, or anything about our presentation tonight that you want to follow up with us on later, our contact information, including our phone numbers and email addresses, are right there on page 1. Moving on to page 2, our communication with those charged with governance. So this is a required communication at the conclusion of our audit. There are certain things that we are required to communicate to you all as the town council. Number 1, our responsibilities as it relates to the audit. So we've audited the financial statements of the governmental activities, the business type activities, the discretely presented component unit, which will be the Carrboro TDA, the Tourism Development Authority, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the town of Carrboro for the year ended June 30th, 2022. Professional standards that we require that we provide you with information about our responsibilities in accordance with auditing standards accepted in the United States of America, as well as certain information related to our plan, scope, and timing of our audit from our engagement letter, which was back in May. The first thing we'd like to point out is that we complete our audit in accordance with, as previously mentioned, generally accepted auditing standards, but also because of the federal and state award money that the town receives, we also have to complete the audit in accordance with government auditing standards, which go sort of above and beyond the typical auditing standards. In accordance with those standards, we are required to report on if we had any internal controls in financial reporting or compliance matters that we came across that could have a material impact on the financial statement. So the gist of it is, if we came across something, non-compliance, maybe not related to the programs that we were mentioning earlier, the 2 programs, but any non-compliance at all as a result of our audit that could result in material misstatements in your financials, we would be required to report those. Happy to report no items of non-compliance. In addition, we also have to point out if we come across any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in our internal controls over financial reporting. We did have one finding to report this year. It will be in the financial statements. It's finding 2021-001, and we will get into that here in a minute on the next page. Flip it to page 3. Our responsibility under the Office of the OMB, Title II, U.S. Code of Federal Regulation, Part 200, Uniform Administrative Requirements. So this is the responsibilities that we have in accordance with essentially the federal single audit requirements. So again, we had to complete compliance audit this year in accordance with the uniform guidance and had no findings related to that. Moving down, qualitative aspects of accounting practices. In this section, we like to discuss any changes in accounting standards that could impact the presentation of the financial statements. And should there be any significant changes, when you're comparing 2021 to 2022, that there may be things that look a little different. There is one item this year, GASB 87, a new pronouncement came out effective for fiscal 2022. It's related to leases. And so some of you, if you're in financial reporting at all on the private company side, there's been a private company version of this that's come out as well. But essentially all leases are coming onto the balance sheet. So your lease activity in the town, both as a lessor or a lessee, are now on the balance sheet. You will see assets and liabilities related to those leases, whereas in the past it was mostly just footnote disclosure information. So you'll see some new line items within the financial statements related to that. Aside from GASB 87, no other changes in accounting policies or pronouncements that should impact the town's financial statements this year. Something else we're required to point out is that accounting estimates are an integral part of the financial statements, so there are some significant estimates built into these financials. There are some numbers in the financial statements that, should assumptions that are used to come up with these estimates be wrong, the numbers themselves could be materially off. As part of our audit, we certainly evaluate the assumptions that go into these, and we recalculate everything and make sure that we believe that they are reasonable. These significant estimates that we identify, number 1, management's estimates of depreciable lives of property and equipment. So property and equipment is a large portion of the governmental activity balance sheet, and so those assets are depreciated over their estimated useful lives. And so that's a significant estimate within the financial statements, those lives themselves. In addition, management's estimates of the allowance for doubtful accounts, so the allowance that we have on accounts receivable for accounts receivable and or uncollectible loan losses, which is based on historical collection experience as well as collateral for those receivables. So that's another significant estimate within the statements. Another one, the management's estimate of the liabilities related to the pension plans, other post-employment benefits. This would be the Elders pension liability that's in the financial statements, also the law enforcement officer special separation allowance, as well as the town's OPEB healthcare plan. So the post-employment benefit there for healthcare. Those are some significant liabilities within the financial statements. There are also some other line items that come along with those liabilities. Actuaries come up with most of the numbers there, so we are kind of recalculating the information that the actuaries give us, and we also look at the inputs that the actuaries receive to make sure that those numbers are accurate. But certainly those are significant estimates. And then lastly, management's estimates of the discount rates, which are used for discounting the lease receivables and lease liabilities. So that's the new one this year. So under the GASB 87, which we mentioned earlier, you've got the leases on the balance sheet. Those are discounted based on some assumptions about the discount rates that should be used. And so should those discount rates be too high or too low, the assets and liabilities could change significantly. Again, we certainly audit the assumptions there and make sure that we are in agreement with the methodology that's used, and we have no concerns over any of the estimates, but we are required to point those out. Moving on to page 4. Difficulties encountered in performing the audit. We encountered no difficulties in dealing with management in performing and completing our audit. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements. We're required to point out to you all if we have any uncorrected misstatements that we're aware of that are within the financial statements, so things that we come across that management decides not to adjust because they don't believe that they're material, we would be required to report those. We have no such items to report, so all of the misstatements noted during the audit were corrected and are reflected in the final financial statements. We are also required to point out any material misstatements that are detected as part of our audit procedures. So we did have some adjustments to the financial statement figures that we were provided for audit, which again are reflected within the financial statements, but that we consider to be material. We've laid out a few of them there. If you want us to go into detail on any of the particular journal entries, we certainly can, but we feel that they are described there. Moving on, if we had any disagreements with management, we would be required to report those. Again, no such disagreements to report. Should management consult with any other accountant? So if we had maybe a disagreement on a number in the financials and management sought an opinion from another accounting firm or another CPA, we would be required to disclose that. No such items that we're aware of. And then lastly, down in the other matters, other significant matters, findings, or issues section, we do go into a little bit more information right there on GASB 87. So if you're interested in the accounting there and what's really changed, that lays it out. There will also be a footnote within the financial statements that explains sort of the changes from fiscal 21 to 22 related to that. Lastly, as an appendix to this report, we've got the management representation letter. So certainly as part of our audit, we rely on management for representations that they make throughout that process. So audits involve a lot of inquiry and then auditing the responses to the inquiries. But there are certainly some things that we rely upon management for. And so this is just a letter that both Arch as well as Richard sign related to the audit that kind of takes responsibility and says, yes, we're auditing the financials, but ultimately these financial statements are the responsibility of the town and town's management, and kind of takes responsibility for that. That's all I've got on the report to town council. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Any questions about the audit report for the council? I have Sammy first and then Randy.
Thank you so much for your work. I'm glad we don't have to do that. You can summarize it.
You're here.
I guess I had a question, Mr. Manager. It's interesting. The leases are something new that's being included. Makes a lot of sense, and I was wondering to what degree our town budget includes the leases as a line item, like spelled out. Do we already do that, or will this trigger us doing that? And if not, could we do so?
Obviously, auditors speak to the changes, a new GASB ruling that we have to do this. So if you can speak to what we're doing forward now.
So the payments for the leases have always been part of the town's budget. Now where they're presented, it's almost like leases are looked at more akin to debt. So it's part of like your debt service. So when you're looking at budgeting for your loan principal and interest payments, that's more where you would see it.
Okay.
But you would have, obviously if you had lease liabilities out there, you're required to make payments on leases, you've always been required to have that in the budget. So the payments themselves, the structure of the leases obviously aren't really changing. It's more just us adapting to what's already there and changing the way that it's presented within the financial statements.
Okay, and so presented, it's not included as this general line item, but rather it's pulled out as a specific line item. Am I understanding correctly, or?
So it could be within department, but I guess it depends on how you all budgeted for fiscal '23. When you're looking at fiscal '23, if you budget debt service altogether sort of as one line, it could be within that. If you broke up the debt service by department and how the departments were servicing the debt, it could be within the department. But
Okay.
ultimately, you just have to see that it's been budgeted for. One thing to point out is that when you issue new leases going forward, so in fiscal '22, this wasn't an issue, but when you enter into a new lease liability going forward, the initial year, you record the proceeds from the lease similar to debt. So if we determined ultimately the long-term liability under this lease is $500,000, you would record a liability for $500,000. You'd recognize the proceeds of the, like debt
Subtract.
proceeds, and then you'd have an offsetting capital outlay for that item, so that it's sort of that intangible right to use an asset.
Okay.
And that could impact your budget. So that's something, if, because right up on year one, you book the proceed and you book the outlay, and then going forward, you're also going to be booking the expenditure for the lease payments as you make them.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have to factor in that capital outlay into the budget if you have lease plans going forward. So yeah, certainly a good question. But it just depends on sort of the activity and if you plan to enter into new leases.
So just back to my original question, is that an item that is spelled out in our budget? I'm just curious to be able to see that as a specific line item.
I'll ask our finance director, do we have a specific line item for leases, or is it just included within the debt service?
The leases has been, in the past, have been included in the operating and stuff. But now with the new gas and stuff, we have to move those, to the financial side. We report them. We are using a thing, software called Debt Book, that we can run different reports if anybody's particularly interested in taking a more deeper dive in that. We can do that.
Yeah, I think I am interested, and specifically I'm thinking of our parking leases, and it's just good to keep a tab of what we're spending in that regard, especially in terms of the conversation we're going to have about parking coming up. So I would like to see that in our upcoming budgeting. If
If you remember last year, we created a
special fund for it,
special fund.
right?
to account for all of the parts.
Yep,
We do have the data of what we've been spending
right.
so far. Yeah, as a total, the town doesn't have a whole lot of leases.
Mhm.
We got a lot of small parking leases,
Right.
basically by there.
Yeah. So I look forward to seeing that included in our budget, if that can be done, Mr. Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. Next is Randy.
Yeah, actually, I had the same question as Sammy, but I had constructed it very differently. But the ongoing conversation really helped to nail it. And actually, I want to thank you, Arch, because understanding the relationship with how you've looked at the GASB 87 and the special funds really helped. Thank you for that. So my question was absorbed.
Thank you, Randy. Any other questions? Susan.
Thank you all so much for your presentation this evening. A couple questions. I'm actually not sure if it's for you or for our finance director, but I believe that you are recommending that we retain a CPA to help staff for the training around the leases, or?
So that was not our recommendation directly, no. So we have a finding within the financial statements related to the material corrections that we recorded as part of the audit. And anytime we have a finding, management has the opportunity to provide their corrective action plan within the financials. So Richard and Arch got together, looked at the finding, and then came up with the response. And I'll let Arch speak to what the plans are there with the.
It was just out of curiosity. I now see how all of this happened, and it was just out of curiosity if a CPA has now been retained and if that training has started yet.
No, we've not retained that CPA.
Mr. Manager.
We're just getting the audit tonight, so.
No, I mean, I know. Yeah, I didn't mean to put the pressure on. So it's more out of curiosity, just kind of heading into the new year. This did present itself as a problem. I assume that this will be done in a timely way in terms of staff getting the training that they need moving forward. Great. And then my second question, I know this. It is noted that this is the second consecutive year the town has submitted its annual report to the local government commission after the required deadline, and we know the circumstances from last year. Is this, to what extent is this something to be concerned about in terms of local government commission? Anything to be concerned about in terms of our bond ratings? If you could give me just a little bit of a sense of how much of a concern this is in terms of 2 missed deadlines.
That's the second item on the agenda. After this one, we can either do it now, but it's also the next item after the audit as well.
We can wait.
Why don't we wait till the next item? Is there additional presentation about the current item, presentation of the audit? I know that you also had the usual handout you provide, which is a summary.
So there was just a financial summary, and then there's a couple bullet points for me to point out after that.
Thank you.
So quickly, the financial summary, again, we were just kind of highlighting some changes from fiscal 21 to 22 with the focus on the general fund. The first Roman numeral, cash and investments, that is across all funds. You'll see that cash is up almost $19 million or 93% as of 6/30/22. A lot of that has to do with just a couple of items. So number one, the first tranche of the ARPA money came in at the end of, or came in during fiscal 22. There's another matching $3.3 million to come in at the beginning of fiscal 23. And so that money is all held at this point as of 6/30/22. And then secondly, the South Greensboro Street financing, there was cash held at the end of the year of about $12.5 million related to that loan that closed during the year. So those two together make up roughly $15 million or so of the increase, or I guess closer to $16 million of the increase. Roman numeral 2, the general fund available fund balance. It did decline this year, so the available fund balance is at $11.3 million versus $14.7 in the prior year. This is fairly consistent with the overall decrease in fund balance in the general fund, so that the general fund did experience a decrease this year. That was largely due to transfers related to capital projects. So there were some large transfers during fiscal 22, the largest being about $5.7 million for the 203 project again. And so non-recurring items that led to a decline in the fund balance there. Obviously exclusive of those items, fund balance would have been up quite a bit in the general fund. And so if you don't expect similar transfers, I think it does paint a sort of a positive picture for the town's fund balance moving forward. Along those same lines, moving down to Roman numeral 3, the general fund revenues and other sources, you'll see that the revenues were up about $3.6 million or 15% from fiscal 21 to fiscal 22. The largest portion of revenues obviously is your ad valorem or property taxes, which were at $15.5 million this year versus $13.4 in the prior year. There was a 0.5 cent increase in property tax rate this year as part of the designation for affordable housing. But really, that only makes up about 1% of the overall increase. The driver is that valuations increased to $2.47 billion, from $2.47 billion to about $2.84 billion. So there was about a $350 million increase in valuations across the town, which led to increased property tax revenue. Moving down, local option sales tax, that's your second largest source, is up to $6.4 million versus $5.4 in the prior year, so up almost $1 million or 17%. That's obviously a strong increase. It's in excess of the city's budget by about $942,000 for those revenues for the year. There was something to keep in mind, a decrease in revenues in fiscal 20. So the beginning of fiscal 20 was fiscal 21 was July of 2020. So certainly still experiencing the impacts of COVID on the local economy there. And so 2021 could have been a bit suppressed, but certainly at fiscal 22 has come back strong with a large increase there. Other significant swings, there's not a lot. Sales and services, was up $139,000 or 157%. That was led by recreation and town center fees, which increased about $94,000 and $41,000 respectively. So again, probably same thing, lingering impacts of COVID on the fiscal 21 numbers. It started to reverse in fiscal 22. Again, in total, at 15.2%, a $3.6 million increase over the prior year. Moving down, Roman numeral 4, we've got the general fund expenditures and other uses. In total, expenditures were at $22.9 million versus $21.6 million in the prior year. So that's a $1.2 million or 6% increase. So again, the increase in revenue certainly outpaced the increase in expenses this year. A couple of the departmental swings that were larger, you'll see the general government increased $460,000. There was about a $73,000 increase in the IT department costs that are included in that. There was also the creation of the communication and engagement department, which had expenses of about $160,000 in fiscal 22 and no similar item in fiscal 21. And then actually the mayor and town council department also increased about $93,000, which included about $51,000 increase in legal costs that were allocated to that department. Moving down, another department with larger change would be the Public Works Department, a $413,000 increase. That was really driven by capital outlays, so capital-related items that were purchased in fiscal 22. Those items were up about $584,000 from the prior year. So exclusive of those capital outlays, the rest of the line items in that department were actually down. But the capital outlays sort of drove the increase. Again, expenses were up 6% or $1.2 million overall, but all departments were well within budget, so no budgetary violations. Roman numeral 5 shows other financing sources and uses. Again, this is where you'll see the big transfers to other funds. So $6.9 million transferred out of the general fund to the capital projects fund. That's largely related to the 203 project, which was $5.7 million of that balance. Roman numeral 6, we like to point out the percentage of available fund balance to budgetary basis expenditures and transfers out. So you'll see that number is at 37.96% this year versus 66.2. Again, kind of beating the dead horse here, but it's the transfers that's kind of driving that decline. It's certainly still a healthy percentage at 37.9%. The LGC puts out an average for similar units. And so you can kind of see units that are similar to you out on the LGC's website. You can run statistics and see kind of where you fall amongst your peer groups in North Carolina. And your peer groups are at 39%. Historically, the town has always been in excess of 50%. You'll see last year was at 66.27. If you backed out that transfer for the 203 project, it would have been around 70% this year. So, getting close to double your peer average. So certainly we think that the fund balance in the town is healthy. And exclusive of those transfers that are sometimes needed for capital projects, no concerns as it relates to the town's fund balance. And then lastly, the property tax collection percentage. Obviously, with property taxes being such a large portion of revenues, the collection of those is certainly important. Obviously, the county is collecting that on the town's behalf and then remitting to the town. But the property tax collection percentage, excluding motor vehicles, which are collected by the state, was at 99.46%, which is pretty consistent with the prior year of 99.51. So certainly continues to be strong there. The last thing that we're required to point out as part of our report, and so when we complete the financial statements, we are required to submit to the LGC a lot of data about the information that's within the financial statements. So we fill out kind of a questionnaire tab and key in a lot of financial data. And they've got formulas that kick out what they call financial performance indicators of concern, or FPICs. If you have any FPICs, we're required to report those to you all, and then you're required to put together a response to the LGC related to those items. Two things that kick out. Number one, we've already mentioned earlier, so the late filing of the financials. So anytime you submit your financial statements after December 1st, you're going to have to basically provide a response to the LGC saying, here's what led to that. Another item, the material weakness in internal controls. So the finding that we related to, finding 2022-001, that is reported in the data input workbook that requires a response. I think the two kind of go hand in hand. And so Arch has got a resolution coming here in a little bit that kind of speaks to those. And then lastly, one that kicked out this year was that there was appropriated fund balance for the general fund in the 2023 budget, and the change in fund balance for 2022 was negative. So those are potential indicators of concern there. If they see a decline in your general fund balance, and also your appropriating fund balance for the next fiscal year, they say, is this going to cause a problem going forward? You can't keep doing this. Your fund balance will erode over time. I think, again, it was driven by the transfers. It's not something that you expect to recur. And exclusive of that, there would have been a healthy increase in the fund balance. So I don't think it's necessarily a concern, but it's something that you're required to respond to the LGC and kind of lay out your argument for. So we are required to report those to you. That kind of concludes everything that we had prepared. Does anyone have any additional questions about our presentation or the audit process this year?
I believe we just have this resolution before us to address the internal control weaknesses or financial reporting issues that you discussed. There have been a couple of revisions based on some emails from the manager earlier today. And then Randy, I believe, had circulated some additional language to the final section C of the draft resolution. The final sentence basically suggesting to replace that final sentence with the following: the steps in A1 when implemented and completed are intended to prevent incorrect data reporting in future years' audits. Is that an accurate reflection of what that sentence should say? Any concerns with that revision from the staff?
Good. We're good.
Great. Any further discussion before somebody, or is there a motion to approve attachment B as revised?
I'll make that motion, and thank you.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Randy and seconded by Danny that we adopt attachment B, which is a revised, as amended, I'll say. And that revised version is in front of you at your places. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Thanks very much. Once again, welcome back to Carrboro. And I guess we'll move on to the next agenda item.
All right, thank you.
If you could hang on just a moment for the next item, which is extension of the contract. Do you all want to speak to that this evening? The next item here is the amendment to the independent audit contract for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022. The purpose of the agenda item is to request that the town council amend the town's audit contract to extend the deadline for submission of the audit to local government commission.
Yes, and so at any time the financials are submitted after the initial due date from the contract that you all previously approved, probably back in April or May, you're required to amend the contract. So we've got to amend the due date of the contract to be some point past the date that we finished the financial statement work. So we've set the end of this month as the due date, but again, the final financial statement should be issued and sent to the LGC tomorrow. So by the time they get the contract amendment, everything will already sort of be done. But we are required to put that forth.
So the recommendation, council members, from staff is to authorize me to execute the required amendment to the contract that you just heard about. Any questions about that? Is there a motion?
Right, didn't you raise a question earlier?
I thought that was going to be in the resolution. Are we?
That was addressed in this resolution.
Oh, okay.
Is that right? Do you have a further question about that, Susan?
Maybe just a little bit more clarification before the vote. I'm just wondering, the fact that we have missed 2 consecutive deadlines, to what extent is that a concern with local government commission? To what extent does that in any way jeopardize our bond ratings? I'm just sort of curious, is it sort of like, this is no big deal, this happens all the time, or it's a little bit of a concern for the town of Carrboro right now?
Mr. Manager?
I think overall, many local governments are having difficulty with the audit process due to staffing concerns, as we're all suffering through with the audit firms as well. But in terms of 2 late reports, I don't really know what that means for the LGC. You can speak to that.
Yeah, there's nothing in particular. 2 doesn't trigger any particular type of requirement or monitoring or anything like that. I think both years it's been a little bit of a strange circumstance. Last year what happened was we discovered the need for a single audit, so a compliance audit, very late in the game. So we discovered it sometime close to the issuance of the financials, and we had to say, oh wait, we were planning to issue the financials next week and now we've got all this extra work to do. So that was one thing. And then this year, actually, GASB 87 had to do with a lot of it. So the implementation, reading through all the leases was quite a bit. And so that led to some delays. And again, I think staffing issues on probably both our sides at that point later in October and November, just were hard to make up for. But nothing similar at this point that we could anticipate for fiscal '23. There's no big pronouncements that would be changing standards that that would require a lot of extra work. And I think that the processes we put in place as the corrective action related to the late finding last year for the financials helped us this year. So we didn't run into any similar issues where we came across major programs that we didn't identify during the preliminary processes of the audit. So I think the corrective action plans that we came up with there worked. So yeah, from our seat, it's not something we plan to do. We've got a lot going on this time of year as CPAs, and so the earlier we can finish the audits, the better. So for us, our plan would certainly be to kind of get back on track and try to submit the audits before the December 1st deadline.
Great. Thank you both.
Corrections are what were included in the resolution that we all just adopted, right? Does that answer your question, Susan?
It does. And Arch, thank you for all your hard work on this, and your staff as well.
Thanks, Susan. Is there a motion to authorize the mayor to execute the amendment to the contract? Moved by Sammy.
Seconded.
Seconded by Danny, that we do so. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Thanks very much to our auditors once again. Welcome back. And Arch and the finance staff, excellent work as usual. Appreciate it. Okay. Mr. Manager, anything else for us tonight?
That's everything from the agenda.
Council members, are we?
Yeah, we are trying to schedule a meeting with our other jurisdictions. Is that with Chapel Hill and Orange County?
You're talking about the joint planning meeting?
Public meeting.
Yeah, so there's a public hearing that has to be held jointly by the jurisdictions, that being the towns of Carrboro and Chapel Hill and Orange County, relating to a zoning request in the southern part of the county that requires all three boards to be present and take action.
Mm-hmm.
So we need a quorum of all three of those boards present. And so that's the poll that I believe the clerk has been sending around.
So what I'm interested in is, we haven't had an Assembly of Government meeting in a long time, and I think since we're putting this effort and we have to meet, it would make sense to address any other issues that we should be talking about jointly. And for example, an update on the green track might be valuable. And then also, I know that the mayors and the chair have been talking about these questions of what is appropriate for us to be sharing cost-wise and or other work. And so I'd love to hear an update on that, especially in light of the fact that during those conversations, two joint bodies have been dismantled kind of unilaterally by the county. And I think that there's an opportunity to kind of like check in and talk about and talk in a way that's transparent for the public in general about what if we're going to be talking about these things, maybe we shouldn't be doing things unilaterally, just to honor the process. So I'm talking specifically about the Food Council and the Climate Council. So it just feels very kind of like out of line with what the spirit is of trying to figure out what we're doing together if action is being taken separately by the bodies without having had any arrival at consensus or agreement on what we're doing there. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Sammy. So a couple of, I'll come to you in just one sec, Barbara. There will be a summary coming out soon about the status of the Green Tract conversations. I actually been meaning to email Richard and the others about what the status of this summary is. But there is the staffs jointly are preparing a summary of the status of that conversation. On the other matter around kind of these other housing related issues, we're going to be scheduling a work session of the council about that, because you're absolutely right. We need to have a conversation now, because we've reached a point in those MMC meetings where we've kind of dug up what the questions are, and I need to make sure I'm understanding where all of you are on those issues before I feel like I can go out and say much more about it to the other boards.
And so I think that it's one thing, like there's two things there. One is like that work session to give you direction to have those conversations with them. But what I'm suggesting is that we do that work session, get kind of on the same page or understand kind of where we are, and then present whatever that position is as a council, as part of an Assembly of Government meeting in the public's eye, and have that conversation. Because I think that part of the issue of when we get to these points of not having a resolution is in part because there's no pressure felt by any of the representatives in those meetings. And I think this is an instance of where it's important to air this and have it as a conversation amongst the different jurisdictions. Are we going to have that work session before that Assembly of Government meeting? And that's the first question I have. And then two, will we be able to include this as an agenda item for that Assembly of Government meeting?
So there's not currently an Assembly of Governments meeting being planned. Let me just make sure that we understand that that's right.
What I'm saying is we should, because we're going to meet.
What we've been asked by the county to do is to indicate availability to participate in this joint planning hearing, public hearing on a planning matter. Whether the other governments want to schedule an Assembly of Governments, I can't answer that question, but I can ask. But that's going to have to be a separate thing, whether it's coincident with or at another date with this planning hearing. The reason there wasn't an Assembly of Governments meeting scheduled this year is because none of us identified anything that needed to take action on. That was basically the reason there wasn't an Assembly of Governments. But I can ask.
I mean, this seems like an item that needs to be taken action on. And so oftentimes,
which item?
This public hearing thing.
Right, but this is a specific kind of legislative process that requires the boards to gather in this particular public hearing format. But anyway, I take your point, Sammy, and I will ask.
Yeah,
that's
my point is that we have a point of action, and there's an opportunity. Oftentimes, we have informational and opportunities for individual electeds to have a conversation about things. The other item that I would be interested in as part of that meeting or Assembly of Government meeting, whatever we want to call it, is an update on the trash study. I know that is the county's been pursuing that, and it would be nice to have a presentation on that jointly, because there are areas where, as towns, we cross over with county stuff, and it seems like it would be a valuable conversation to have.
Let me find out. Thank you for raising those questions, sir. Barbara, I believe you had a question.
Yeah, and a couple of things that I didn't say earlier at the beginning of the meeting. Still celebrating Black History Month. I believe there is a Black History Month Knowledge Bowl this Saturday. It is sponsored by the women of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Anita. And also the Black History Month bike ride, which is Sunday.
Sunday at noon, I believe. It's Sunday midday.
Yeah, and so back to what Sammy was asking. So I read the email, and I understand what Sammy is saying about us coming together in transparency. But for that particular item, isn't it kind of like when we came together here and we only had to have a quorum, so everybody doesn't have to be there? Like only 4 of us need to show up, I presume, a quorum from anybody.
Right.
And so it's like any meeting, though.
Right. And so all of us wouldn't necessarily be there to participate, because it may be, I saw some of you responded already. And so I don't know if I'm going to respond or not, but I mean, you're correct, Sammy. But I don't know that everyone would show up and be able to take part, because when you specifically say, a quorum, it may or may not be all of us, I guess is what I'm saying.
And I don't know how the other board's members are interpreting that either, right? So I just need to ask and find out how folks will respond to this idea.
Yeah, I mean, again, if it seems like it would make sense to do it because we're already meeting, so I would encourage you to present it like that. But if that's not the time and place, then sometime soon, because there's a lot of. When was the last time we had an Assembly of Government meeting?
A couple of years, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are members on this council who've never even participated. So I think just for the value of the experience, so that we weigh in appropriately relative to what the value of that forum is, I think there's a reason to have it just on those terms, but then there's these issues that we also need to be engaging in with our colleagues from other jurisdictions.
Can I ask?
I hear you.
Oh,
And
I'm sorry.
just one second, Barbara. I hear you. I just will say that I know that both I and the other mayors and the chair of the county commissioners were also hearing from other board members that they felt like, well, if there's nothing to take action on, they didn't feel like having a meeting. That was, so I'm getting, there's sort of multiple
Right.
views we're getting on that.
But
So,
we're-
but I
we've
take
got
your
an
point,
action
and
item.
I will raise the question.
Thanks.
Barbara, yes.
Yeah, and so Sammy, so you're talking about everybody coming together, or would
Yeah,
there be an opportunity maybe for just us and the county commissioners to engage, or you're wanting everybody?
The items that I'm interested in does involve all the jurisdictions,
Okay.
and historically how these meetings have worked is everyone comes, and like this meeting, quorum is necessary for this specific thing because we're going to make some joint decision there on the spot. In other meetings, we never really had that kind of requirement because it's kind of rare that a decision is made in the space itself. So if anything, this is kind of like a higher standard than the other meetings that we've had as Assembly of Government meeting. Because in those, there was no requirement for even a quorum.
I will ask, and I'll just add one more layer of complication, which is that the public hearing on this planning matter does not involve the town of Hillsborough, and so they would not be present as currently conceived.
And so the way we've handled that in the past is there have been items where jurisdiction will step out early.
Yeah, I know that. I'm just saying that right now, they're not even
Right.
in this conversation
So
about.
we could start that conversation, I would hope. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Randy, seconded by Barbara. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Matter passes unanimously. We are adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you.